Well, I'm excited about this. I love studying scripture, studying biblical truth, theology, and connecting it with real life topics. So that we get to do this today is exciting for me, and looking forward to digging in here. I want to say we had some note sheets. If you need a note sheet, would you throw up your hand if you don't have something to take notes on right now? My lovely assistant / wife will hand one your way. So, anxiety is our topic for the day. And as we get started, I want you to help me to define this. Okay, I have a dictionary definition I'm going to put on here in a second, but little interaction, audience participation. When you think of anxiety, when you're experiencing it, and we all experience it to one degree or another, what does it feel like? Pressure, okay? What else? Fear? Yeah? Someone else? Go ahead. Desperation. Out of control. Good. Anything else? Feeling it. No peace. Lack of peace, right? No peace. Turmoil. Yeah. Okay. So the dictionary definition is distress or uneasiness of mind caused by fear or danger of misfortune. Okay. So that's the definition. But in terms of what it feels like, yeah, a lot of these things that you mentioned, that's what it feels like. That's how we experience it. So here's another question. What circumstances tend to make us feel anxiety? What life circumstances, experiences make us feel anxiety? Give me some examples of things that we become anxious or we worry about. Too much to do. Okay. So we'll just say work, too much work, and so this is like a circumstantial, something that we're all, I think, familiar with, and what that feels like. What else? What do we worry about? Failure. Gosh, failure. Whether that's in our work or someone just said children, so we'll list that up here. Failure in our parenting. What else? Health. Yeah, that's a good one. Oops. Time. Deadlines. Yep. Just feel the pressure and then we worry. Good. How about finances? Worry about that. I mean, and we could go on with different life experiences and how we feel the sense of internal angst, pressure, fear regarding those things. So I want to say right up front, as we think about anxiety and all the different types of things that cause us to feel anxiety inside, we are not here today to solve once and for all the problem of anxiety. We're not here to make it go away or to teach you some tips so that you can help other people make their anxiety go away, to flip that switch off once and for all in life. I mean, we'd all love if that were the case. We don't want to be plagued by anxiety, but we're not here for that reason. What we're here for is to understand it with greater clarity and to understand along with that who God is, what He's like, how God through Christ meets us in our struggles with anxiety. And that theme you will pick up on throughout the day, whether it's me speaking or Don or Dax, that we believe this isn't about managing a problem we have, and as much as we'd like to make it go away, it's not really about that. It's about learning who our God is, having our eyes open to see Him more clearly. Now, are there results and is there fruit of that? Absolutely. But first and foremost, it's about a relationship with our Creator. Okay? So I'm going to get our slideshow going here. I've got We've got the dry erase board, we've got slides, we've got all sorts of tricks here. So if I can get this going. Let's just think about the beginning for 1 second. Key verse, Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Beautiful, amazing world we all get to live in. And at the end of chapter 1, it says, God looked over all he had made, and behold, it was very good. It was complete. Everything was arranged perfectly for God's purposes, for his will. And at this time, think about this. There were this is amazing to contemplate. No dangers, no threats, no risks. This big, beautiful world to explore, to enjoy, with absolutely no danger. It's almost hard to imagine that. Since we moved up here to Washington, I've been grown to enjoy. I was never an outdoorsy type of guy, but I've enjoyed hiking and just the beauty of this area. It's amazing. It's nothing like it. I've lived in lots of other parts of the country. It's nothing like it. And when two things happen, when I'm out there walking around and looking at the mountain, like Mount Rainier, and the beautiful streams and the trees and the being impacted by the beauty of it all, I often think, wow, God, you're amazing. Like, your handiwork is just incredible. And there's worship that happens, but there's something else that happens too. I mean, every time I'm out there, you know what I'm thinking? Am I going to get eaten by something today? Mountain lion, bear. I mean, I'd love to be able to go out there and not have that little thought. Don and I went on a hike recently, even not just around here. I was thinking about there had been a cougar sighting, Summit Lake last summer. Like, is that cougar still around? So think of when God created the world. I mean, it's just beautiful environment with no danger. Amazing. So then, let's just remember the fall for a moment. And some of you were with us last time, some of you were not. We're going to be building on the foundations we laid last spring. And if you haven't heard those messages, I would encourage you, I can tell you where the YouTube channel is. You can go and watch those because they're really important. Say a little bit that will elaborate on some of those ideas, but I would, again, encourage you to go back there. But here's what happened. God creates this world, again, complete and perfect for all of his purposes. And then you have Adam and Eve, whom he made in his image, and they were deceived, weren't they? And so the serpent lies and says, in the day you eat from this fruit, your eyes will be open, you'll be like God, knowing good and evil, which was enticing. It held out as a form of promise for them. And they went for it, didn't they? And here's what they decided. They decided it would be better for them to live like God, to be like God, than to live in submission to God, to live as children dependent upon their Father. That would be better for them to make their own decisions, to make their own choices, to determine for themselves what is good or evil, which, again, as we explained last time, and I'd point you back to those messages, which doesn't mean good and evil in some moral sense, but which means I want to determine for myself what is desirable, beneficial for my life or not. And every human being, since the fall, has lived that way. And the word we use for that, big word, and you hear it out there in the culture at times, but the word is autonomy, self-governance. From our first clear thoughts as we grow up, there is this inherent sense of trust in self, trust in my perspective. I know best. And it began right there with Adam and Eve. And God had said, you recall, in the day you eat of that fruit, you will surely, what? You will die. Did they die physically in the day they ate from the fruit? From the tree? I'm sorry? The process began. Exactly. But they didn't die physically right at that moment. They did, however, die spiritually. There's a sense in which God is saying, look, for you to live that way, for you to live as God is death, spiritual death. And then there were some consequences which God kind of worked into his world as a result of that. Let's just read a few verses here. After they took the fruit and ate from it, having made that decision, living now autonomously, God comes to them and talks to them about the curse. So verse 14, and we'll just read a section here, verse 14 through 19. Okay? The Lord said to the serpent, because you have done this, cursed are you more than all cattle and more than every beast of the field. On your belly you will go, dust you will eat all the days of your life. And I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your seed and her seed. He shall bruise you on the head, and you shall bruise him on the heel. To the woman he said, I will greatly multiply your pain in childbirth. In pain you will bring forth children, yet your desire will be for your husband, and he will rule over you. Then to Adam he said, because you have listened to the voice of your wife, and have eaten from the tree about which I commanded you, saying, you shall not eat from it, cursed is the ground because of you. In toil you will eat of it all the days of your life. Both thorns and thistles it shall grow for you, and you will eat the plants of the field. By the sweat of your face you will eat bread, till you return to the ground, because from it you were taken, for you are dust, and to dust you shall return. So we'll stop there. He's talking about these different outworkings of the curse, one being pain and childbirth, and then the fact that for us to eat in this world is going to have to be toil, sweat of your brow, difficult. The world that you're trying to cultivate this food from is going to kind of work against you in a way. And then he says, and you're going to die. From dust you were created, and to dust you will return. From this point forward, the world is filled with all sorts of dangers. Natural disasters, diseases of all kinds, death itself. World of conflicts, cancer, accidents, car accidents, plane crashes. So, we live in a cursed world in which we are surrounded by dangers, in which we are a danger to ourselves, and in which we are a danger to one another. We live in a cursed world in which anxiety makes a lot of sense. Doesn't it? When you think about all the risks, all the threats. Look at it this way. Personal autonomy and that root human problem, depravity. We'll say a little bit more about that in a few minutes. But personal autonomy combined with an uncontrollable, dangerous world, I mean, the natural outworking of that is anxiety. When I'm reminded by circumstances I don't like, when I'm reminded I can't control them, I can't make them stop, I can't change them, I can't prevent every bad thing from happening, what I feel on the inside is anxiety, fear, dread, worry. Read recently where anxiety disorders are among the most common of all psychological disorders, affecting up to 30% of the population at some point in their lives. And that's on the level of a disorder, which means when it's debilitating. Okay, but as we said earlier, we all experience it to some degree, to some extent. Many forms of anxiety disorders. Have you heard of any? What would be a form of anxiety disorder? Can you tell me any that you've heard of? Any kind of or subcategories of anxiety disorders? Go ahead. Panic attacks would be, yeah. Social anxiety disorder, SAD, S-A-D, yeah. You ever heard of generalized anxiety disorder? It's just where, hey, anything and everything causes a person to experience anxiety, and sometimes crippling, debilitating anxiety. Good. Phobias would be an example. Heard recently of coulrophobia, which is fear of clowns. And when I read about that, I thought, is anyone not afraid of clowns? Like, there should be a mental illness category. If you're not afraid of clowns, there's something wrong with you. Hypochondria, PTSD. They say when you look at definitions of anxiety, or what psychologists say about it, they say, look, anxiety is a little different from fear. We think it's almost synonymous with fear, but fear is when you're presently in some circumstance and you feel that fear. And they say anxiety is like future-oriented fear, where you're looking ahead. Well, PTSD is like looking backwards. It's like a fear where something traumatic has happened to you or to someone you love, and you're looking back on that and experiencing many of these same thoughts and emotions. So yeah, PTSD would be an example. Absolutely, yeah. Evolutionary psychologists would say, this is interesting, hey, look, anxiety is a survival adaptation kind of in hyperdrive. So it's a good thing, and couldn't we agree? Hey, look, it's a good thing. When you live in a world in which there are dangers, you don't want your children just playing out in the middle of the street. You want them to have some sense of anxiety so they're not doing foolish, reckless things. But they would say, look, it's that self-protective instinct that's just kind of to an extreme. And we would say, in light of what God communicates to us about the human problem, it is an autonomous survival instinct. It's a survival instinct, listen, this is really important, survival instinct which leaves God out of the picture, out of the equation. It's when I feel like my survival is up to me, or the survival and the well-being of my children is up to me. A friend of mine has one of the real nice, expensive drones, and he was showing me how there's this feature on there, and he had it out here at the church. And he said, hey, I can get this thing focused in on you, so then wherever you walk around this property, that drone will just follow you overhead. Now, I got to order 3 of those things. So my kids, they go into school. I mean, they're going to have a drone just everywhere. Mine's going to have missile deployment options too. So drone, yeah, it's like the helicopter. We'll just take that to another level, Dax. You hear about the helicopter parenting. What's that? Hey, me too. I'm with you, Danny. So look, this is a normal, natural human experience. One of the things I want to do is normalize this a bit, because it's part of life in a fallen world. Okay, let's keep going. I want to say a few things about personality. So here's you. Yeah, you have kind of a big head. Sorry. That's you, okay? And there's God up there. Just real simple, these illustrations. But this is really important. In terms of personality, you know Psalm 139 says we're all fearfully and wonderfully made. Okay? So those grid lines on that big round head there just represent the uniqueness of who you are, or the uniqueness of, if you're in a counseling situation, the uniqueness of who your counselee is. Someone who's been shaped by not only their genetics, but also their family environment and what that was like, and their experiences in life, what they've gone through. All those things shape who someone is. And God says, look, we are all fearfully and wonderfully made. We were designed by God to be unique individuals. And that is good. And that's a great gift. We talk about the gifts that God gives us. And some of us are more athletic than others, and some of us are more artistic than others, and some of us are more mathematical in their thinking, and others are have an aptitude for English and writing and things like that. We're all different. There's people, and then there's people who are a little more introverted. I mean, we're all different, and that's good in the design of God. What the Bible describes in Romans, for example, and we really have seen this in what we talked about earlier regarding the fall, it's the same idea, but this depravity problem we have, God gave us over to lust of impurity, degrading passions, a depraved mind. These are the 3 things in Romans 1. If you look at that passage where God says, I gave them over, I gave them over, I gave them over. And he did that as a response to the rejection of him that took place there in the garden, that takes place in our lives, that autonomous rejection of God. God says, well, fine, I'm going to turn you over then to your desires, to what you want. Sorry, it's kind of hard to see up there. Lust of impurity, degrading passions, a depraved mind. So what happens is you have the good gifts and abilities God has given, and then depravity just weaves itself throughout and just poisons everything. So think about this for a second. And I just sort of an observation I've made. I've read some things about this as well. But there are certain people who have a propensity for anxiety. And sometimes it relates to their personality. People who are more perfectionistic, people who are more detail-oriented, analytical, tend to struggle more with anxiety. And it makes sense that they would. People who are sensitive, maybe highly relational, sensitive others, and then they fear what others think of them. It goes along with so any one of those good gifts and the uniqueness of who God made them to be, you mix in there, or you weave throughout that depravity, autonomy, and it becomes this kind of toxic mix, which is something God created good, and yet there's this fallenness that permeates the whole thing. And so when you think about whether it's your struggle with anxiety, it's always wrapped up in something about who you are and how you interpret your life experiences. Or if you're counseling someone else, you might identify that they have a certain personality type that's good and who God made them to be, but sin has perverted that. And it's become a harmful thing. It's important to understand. And what happens when that's the case is this. This is Atlas, okay? For the ancient Greek god Atlas. When someone mentioned here, out of control, this is what's going on. When you feel this stuff on the inside, there's a sense in which this is what's happening. The whole world is on your shoulders. When we worry about our kids, we're like, gosh, their future, and we tend to think it is like up to me. And if I blow it here in any respect, I mean, it could be complete turmoil, and then that's gonna fall on me. So someone who is thinking about, man, all these things, and maybe simultaneously, it's like the weight of the world is on that person's shoulders. And that's a miserable place to be, isn't it? You have all felt that to some extent. The pressure of that. There's no peace. There's no joy. There's no freedom. It's bondage. It's heavy. It's burdensome. It's crushing weight. So, is there hope? Is there hope? Thankfully, there is. A couple passages I want us to look at. In fact, I'm gonna skip one of them for the sake of time here. So this is the Luke one. I'll just sort of summarize this. You remember Mary and Martha. And Martha is working away in the kitchen. She's been hosting some people for dinner, and she's really worried and frustrated, feeling pressure. And what's Mary doing? You remember? It's illustrated there. What's Mary doing? Sitting at Jesus' feet, spending time with him, listening to him. And at one point, Martha comes up to Jesus like, hey, can you say something to her? Because I could use a little help in there. And Jesus says, hey, she's chosen the good thing, the needful thing. And in Jesus' interactions with Martha, as you see different sort of vignettes throughout the Gospels. I mean, Martha's just this worrisome person. She's always fearful, caring about many things, caring too much. I know you're going to talk about that later. I won't steal your thunder. Sorry. So look at John 11. This is where, I mean, you want to talk about things going badly. John 11, it's one thing to have, your dinner plans kind of disrupted by the work that needs to be done and feeling like it's not getting done the way you want it to be. It's another thing for your sibling to die, and in your mind to die prematurely. And contextually, her brother Lazarus has died. And the disciples are off with Jesus somewhere else, and Jesus knows exactly what's going on with Lazarus, and he purposefully delays. He could have gone sooner. He could have healed Lazarus before he died, but he purposefully delays. And so Mary and Martha are left to grieve over their dead brother. So John 11, 17 through 44, read this, just make a few comments. And hopefully you can, here's what I want you to see. God has compassion for anxious people. Jesus came for anxious people. Say, Jesus came for autonomous people who think the universe would be better if they could be God. He came to rescue them from their own sense of sovereignty. And this is a very powerful illustration of that. All the things we talked about earlier that are dangerous about our world are anything from disease to car accident to what could go wrong with your child. them making poor choices or them getting themselves into trouble with something. I mean, any one of those things is like a little omen of death. Sort of points forward to the ultimate biggest problem, which is death itself. Well, that's what we're facing here, death. So let's read John 11, verse 17. So when Jesus came, he found that that is Lazarus, had already been in the tomb 4 days. Now Bethany was near Jerusalem, about 2 miles off, and many of the Jews had come to Martha and Mary to console them concerning their brother. Martha, therefore, when she heard that Jesus was coming, went to meet him, but Mary stayed at the house. Martha then said to Jesus, here she comes, and she says, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. Even now I know that whatever you ask of God, God will give you. Jesus said to her, your brother will rise again. Martha said to him, I know that he will rise again in the resurrection on the last day. Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me will live even if he dies. And everyone who lives and believes in me will never die. Do you believe this? She said to him, yes, Lord. I have believed that you are the Christ, the Son of God, even he who comes into the world. When she had said this, she went away and called Mary her sister, saying secretly, the teacher is here and is calling for you. And when she heard it, she got up quickly and was coming to him. Now Jesus had not yet come into the village, but was still in the place where Martha met him. Then the Jews who were with her in the house and consoling her, when they saw that Mary got up quickly and went out, they followed her, supposing that she was going to the tomb to weep there. Therefore, when Mary came where Jesus was, she saw him and fell at his feet, saying to him, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. When Jesus therefore saw her weeping, and the Jews who came with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in spirit and was troubled, and said, where have you laid him? They said to him, Lord, come and see. Jesus wept. Let's stop there for one moment and reflect on that. I said earlier, Jesus has compassion on anxious people. I mean, he inserted himself into the situation, and not in some aloof way, as we could conceive of God kind of, I mean, he's above all of this, right? He's bigger than all this. He's the creator of all things. I mean, you could conceive of him entering into the situation just kind of almost like a casual way or a distant way, or, hey, people just calm down. But I mean, Jesus goes in and he feels it. And he feels the loss with them, the loss of death. He feels, in a sense, what it's like for a human being when their worst nightmare has come true. He feels it. And he weeps with them. We're talking about the wonderful counselor here, right? And he weeps with them. And then the Jews are marveling. Look at how he loved him. Verse 36. Some of them said, could not this man who opened the eyes of the blind have kept this man also from dying? Again, questioning God's plan, which is what we always do, isn't it? So Jesus, again, being deeply moved within, came to the tomb. Now it was a cave, and a stone was lying against it. Jesus said, remove the stone. Martha, the sister of the deceased, said to him, Lord, by this time there will be a stench, for he has been dead 4 days. Jesus said to her, did I not say to you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God? So they removed the stone. Then Jesus raised his eyes and said, Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I knew that you always hear me, but because of the people standing around it, I said it, so that they may believe that you sent me. When he said these things, he cried out with a loud voice, Lazarus, come forth. The man who had died came forth, bound hand and foot with wrappings, and his face was wrapped around with cloth. Jesus said to them, unbind him and let him go. I mean, what a miracle. Raised Lazarus from the dead. Demonstrated his ability to solve man's greatest problem. Well, I'll say it this way, to solve man's greatest physical problem. Everything people worry about, everything we worry about, is an omen of death. It's a little reminder that at the end, everything is taken away from you ultimately. And here's Jesus demonstrating his sovereignty, his power over our greatest threat, conquered death. And he will go on from here, having done all that is necessary for a person to have the promise of resurrection, to have the promise of forgiveness. He will go on from here to the cross, where he will take upon himself the guilt of autonomous anxiety. and everything else. He'll take it upon himself, and he will grant us his righteousness. And that's vital. And how does God, we kind of, I see some of you nodding, and we agree with that, and we can give mental assent to that, but how does it really sink in day-to-day life for us as we battle our anxiety, or for the people that we're counseling? How does God cause the truth of the gospel, the reality of Jesus' greatness and his mercy, how does God cause that to sink in? Remember the game Tetris? You played this game? What's that? I know, man. It's true. Look at those graphics, man. So when you're playing Tetris and the blocks are falling and you're switching them around, and if you make a complete line, it disappears. And that's the way you want to keep the game going, is keep those lines disappearing. But eventually these little gaps form and it keeps building up. As you get closer to the top, those bricks are not falling any quicker, but it feels like they're falling faster, doesn't it? Because you have less time. And there's when you're playing it, there's a sense of anxiety that wells up within you as you're trying to, oh my gosh, and then you just feel it's like, game over. I'm thinking of the line in Job, okay? Remember when Job says this? What I feared the most has come upon me. You know what he's saying? Game over. Whether it's your life, people you're trying to come alongside, they are feeling the weight, the pressure, the turmoil of anxiety. Just like Jesus sovereignly arranged the circumstances of Lazarus' death and then came in to save the day. God arranges, orchestrates things, lets us go through things to get us to game over. Done. I want to control, but I can't control. I want to ensure a good financial outcome, a good relational outcome, a good professional outcome, and I can't. God is teaching. He's bringing us to that breaking point. He's bringing us to see that we need another ruler. That my autonomy is not adequate. My autonomy is poisonous, is deceptive, is destructive. God's causing all things to work together for good. The chief good being opening our eyes to who he is, the sovereign king, the actual sovereign. I had a hypochondriac friend of mine talking to me at one point about some stomach issues he was having. And he had done some research online, which is probably the worst thing you can do. Dax was a doctor, right? WebMD or whatever. And so he's telling me, what's that? Dave, no one would have known. It actually was not David, although he is a bit of a hypochondriac. I can tell you that. And so am I. Hey, it's good. So I'm talking to this guy, and he's saying, hey, I read some things, and it could be an ulcer. And he listed a couple. I said, hey, look, man, because I had gone down that path previously. I had some stomach issues myself. I was like, could be colitis, Crohn's, cancer. You could have a heart disease. And I just start listening. He's like, his face is like, this isn't helping me, man. But I'm saying, look, just get the game over, bro. You could have something you don't even know about. You could have a heart condition. You could drop dead tomorrow. You don't even have no idea. In some ways, it's liberating just to realize there's so much. There's so many threats and risks and dangers. If you knew them all, gosh, how'd you even go another 5 minutes? Why would you even get out of bed? So God works in our lives is to show us you're not in control, and that's good. I'm here to set you free from you. The self-inflicted torture. So finally, I just find this fascinating because I read a lot of secular psychology resources, and I find it fascinating what they're finding. Let's just close with these little illustrations from the secular psychological world. One workbook I have on my shelf, trying too hard to control worry, over control, is the major problem in chronic worry rather than the opposite, having poor control over worry, under control. This is why learning to let go of control and accepting anxiety are critical goals in cognitive therapy of worry. You see that? Learning to let go and accept anxiety. Similar one And I'll say a few things about this. Growing research shows that anxiety management and control feeds anxiety, and fear shrinks lives and promotes the suffering you know about firsthand. When you add management and struggle to normal human pain, you often get more pain. In fact, you get suffering. What research shows is best, and what we want to do is to help people bring acceptance, compassion, and gentleness to their unpleasant thoughts, feelings, memories, and even their sense of self. I read these resources and I think, oh my goodness, this is amazing how they're pointing to the gospel. They don't even realize it, but they're pointing to the human need for the gospel in many senses, but especially these two. First of all, they're saying, look, the more you try to manage it and fix it, the worse you become. Now you have what they call, is a big word, but meta worry. Now you're worried about your worry. Not only are you worried about everything else in your life, but you're worried. I can just write worry up here. You're worried about your worry. Good luck with that. The crushing weight of that. And they're saying, look, this is actually psychologically unhealthy for people. They don't point to the Creator. They don't point to His sovereignty. But in some ways, unwittingly, that's who they're pointing to, our need for Him. And along with that, another aspect of this, I think, points us to the gospel, is they're saying, look, view it, like accept it, and view it with compassion, gentleness. They talk about showing kindness to yourself, like having mercy on yourself. Like, you know what adds to anxiety too is the condemnation that I experience. When I feel worried about something, and then not only that, but I also feel stupid about feeling worried. And I feel bad about myself because I'm worried. And think about just the vicious cycle of that. I mean, it's miserable. And so what the psychologists say is, look, you need to learn to kind of speak kindly to yourself. Like, ease up on yourself a bit. So think about this. It's one thing for you to learn to think more compassionately and kindly about your own thoughts. It's quite another thing for the Creator of the universe to say this to you. For the Creator to tell you, look, there's no condemnation for you. Hey, I see your anxiety, and I know better than you do why you're worried. And I see what's underneath it. I see that you're having a tug of war with me, God says. I see that you have a problem with my rule and authority in your life. You want to be the authority. I see what's underneath it. And despite the rebellious nature of that, God says, I love you. And I've provided covering for you. And there's no condemnation for you. We'll get into this more later, but if there's a feel to the counseling office or again, from my perspective, this is about being a good friend, okay? There's a feel to any interaction where someone's opening up their chest and saying, here's what I'm wrestling with. Here's the darkness of what I'm wrestling with. The atmosphere should have this tone of no condemnation. God loves you. He sees it. He sees what's underneath it, what's behind it. The pure evil of that, and He's covered you. He loves you. He's here to set you free from you. So my hope is, as we go throughout these next few sessions, that gospel flavor, tone, call it what you want to call it, will be kind of soaking into your soul a bit as we talk about anxiety more.